So Emma was raised in a very privileged background. She grew up in Cape Town, very wealthy family. Her father, Hugenote Rutherfoord, was a merchant, but he was also very involved in politics. And he actually took a very firm stance with ending slavery in, Cape Town at the time, but also in Greater South Africa later. And she would always sit in whenever he had guests and would listen in whenever people were visiting to talk with him about politics. One of the people who ended up visiting, who she listened in on, was the young minister from Bloemfontein, who was Andrew Murray. She ended up marrying. And also her mother was very involved in outreach programs in Cape Town. She worked at Sunday schools. There was a huge shortage of teachers in South Africa. And she would volunteer, and eventually Emma also started volunteering and really sort of taking up the torch with that. And she ended up the assistant to the principal of a school. And these two things sort of combined for her, and I think also made her so much more interested when Andrew Murray eventually showed up in her life, in the education, especially the education of young women in South Africa, and especially with all of her politics background. She was a lot more aware of the gaps that there were. The Vrou-sendelinge, or the Women's Missionary Union in South Africa, it's probably Emma's biggest project that she ever took on. But it came out of a lot of small influences through her travels with Andrew in her life. So she decided very quickly, nope, I'm not just going to stay at home. I'm in the Osseval with you, going to the mission fields, going to all these people. And she also ended up almost his assistant and his secretary, sort of helping him write his sermons, reading through them. And in a lot of his notes, he would always go to her and ask her opinion and sort of get her input. And Andrew also had a very big interest in education in South Africa. He really felt that people needed access to education and better education. And she, through her background, also felt this. And she especially noticed the other ministers' wives while she was living in Bloemfontein. They weren't really contributing. She would call them, you're his wife but not his partner, and you're not really contributing past the housework. And she saw this as a gap in their education. She saw it as they didn't actually know enough to be able to contribute. So eventually, when they moved to Wellington, and together they founded the Hugenote Seminarie for girls in Wellington, she saw the gap. There was a lot of interest in mission work, especially with Ferguson coming through from America. She was a missionary woman trained at Mount Holyoke, who they brought in to be the president. And the two of them, I think, just meshed together. And they started the Huguenot Mission Society, which was a sort of small group for the students at the Huguenot Seminary and the teachers to be able to start doing mission work. And they began a mission class. And obviously, Andrew was sort of supporting this the whole way with his connections in the background. There's a lot of talk of him trying to get funding as well. And eventually, this grew into the Women's Missionary Union as more and more little mission circles popped up from her influence. And it became the biggest mission circle in South Africa, and they still have a lot of influence, actually.